500,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccine Pfizer arrive in Georgia. The Georgian government administration confirms the information. These are the doses that Georgia gets as a gift from US government. Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili said a few weeks ago that Georgia would receive several 100,000 doses of Pfizer as a gift from US government.
The Parliament approved the revised version of the draft law on the state budget of Georgia for 2021 with 85 votes against none. According to the changes in the state budget for 2021, the GDP will increase from 3.4% to 7.7%. The deficit is reduced from 7.6% to 6.9%. Government debt is reduced to 54.6%. Budget revenues increase by 1,175 million lari, and the government increases taxes by 1,114 million lari. Almost 19.5 billion lari will be spent from the state budget next year.
The volume of non-performing loans is down in the commercial banks, show the statistics from the National Bank of Georgia. According to the document, as of May 2021, the volume of the non-performing loans amounted to 3 billion Georgian lari, or 7.6% of the total portfolio. For comparison, this rate stood at 8.5% in March. Decline of non-performing loans indicates that the financial system is improving.
According to the NCDC's most recent study, 67% of the vaccinated population in Georgia are women, 33% are men. The highest doses administered are in Biliki, Ajara, and Imereti. Vaccination against COVID-19 in Georgia started on March 15. At the moment, immunization is possible with 4 vaccines: Sinopharm, Sinovac, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca.
And this is the Checkpoints, anchored and co-authored by Elena Kvanchilashvili and myself. I'm Georgi Sakadze. Here we gathered in the Forbes studio to tell you more, as usual, about business and economics.
It is Sunday and 10 p.m. sharp as usual. Pace of vaccination is still the biggest challenge for Georgia. We have counted, and in order to reach Georgia's target, that is 60% of the population 18 years and up vaccinated fully by 2021, as set in the National Vaccination Deployment Plan, daily jabs should exceed 19,000. Today, this indicator stands at around 11,000 on average. This week, the main message coming from the World Health Organization was that by mid-2022, 70% of all countries' population in the world should be fully vaccinated, and that only in this case the world can fight the new strains effectively. Georgia laid a lot of emphasis on COVAX platform to get vaccines in the wake of the pandemic. However, it turned out that WHO was able to deliver much less on vaccine deployment, not only for Georgia, but other countries as well. This and many more aspects came into the interview with the head of WHO Country Office, Dr. Silviu Domente. Mr. Domente, thank you for being with us and taking our questions, and very glad to have finally meet you. How would you assess the current situation, current COVID situation, so to say, in Georgia?
The current situation is worsening not only in Georgia, is worsening in the whole region and globally, because we had like 6 weeks of stabilization, even more, and after that, in the last 4 weeks, we can witness a rise in number of cases of COVID. So the situation, in a way, reflects the similar situation we had a year ago, when the summer holidays started, when the governments have eased all these public health and social measures, and then the touristic season started, and so on. So what is important, so it is not unexpected. The WHO has expected this, and the tools we use to, in a way, to shape the situation. So we predicted that in July, August we can have an increase in numbers, and we warned the member states. And but what is important now is to monitor very closely the situation, and we are again very closely in touch with NCDC, with the Ministry of Health, and the monitoring is the number of new cases in Georgia are stable, but they are quite high, and there is a tendency of increasing, and we know that some of the public health and social measures have been eased.
Was it the right decision? Because we heard from the head of NCDC that it might have been quite a hasty decision to lift restrictions. What is WHO's take on that?
WHO was always promoting a kind of balanced approach because we understand so, and every country has to take this decision based on the risk assessment and the epidemiological situation assessment at country level. So every country makes these decisions based on that, and we understand there is also overall pandemic fatigue of the population, there is impact of the economy and so on, but at the same time we have to be careful and protect people's health, and especially taking into consideration that the vaccination coverage is still quite low, so we have to be very careful. But I know that both the ministry and NCDC, they are monitoring the situation very closely, and they don't exclude the reintroduction of some measures in the future if needed.
So would you say that if positivity rate that we have now is maintained, there is we can foresee another lockdown?
There is a possibility. Nobody can exclude this. Depends on the situation. If the number will go very high, and if the health system will not manage to deal with an increased number of severe cases, then I don't exclude this. But of course, it is the decision of the authorities.
Of course. And you mentioned this pandemic fatigue, and one more component here was that not only to lift the restrictions, but also to forgive the penalties for breaching these restrictions. How does WHO assess this decision?
Penalties are not the best way to improve restrictions. We rely to enforce restrictions, so we rely on population of Georgia. So far in the past, we know that the population of Georgia was quite committed in implementing all those restrictions, and the level of compliance in Georgia was very high because we are conducting regularly behavioral insights surveys on COVID situation, and we know that the level of compliance of the population with measures, with wearing masks, with keeping distance, was very, very high, one of the highest in the region. So it's better to rely on this, on the population willingness, and to communicate this in a proper way to the population instead of just relying on restrictions and fines.
Okay, very, very diplomatic answer, Mr. Domente. Are you happy with the vaccination pace in Georgia?
I don't think anybody is happy, and we know that there are many reasons for this, and the main reason here was the lack of enough vaccines for the country. We know that Georgia was very early prepared for vaccination and for mass vaccination. Georgia developed a very detailed and a very comprehensive vaccine deployment and vaccination plan. So all the structures at central and the regional, local level have been prepared for that, and people train and so on. But unfortunately, the number of vaccines that the country got so far was quite low. But from those vaccines that the country got, so the utilization rate was quite high. We know that from the vaccines that Georgia got, the utilization rate is around 97%, which is quite high. At the same time, so the number of vaccines was limited, and it was not possible to start a real mass vaccination. It's only now recently that Georgia got additional 1 million doses of vaccine. So we expect now the real mass vaccination to start, and we as WHO, we put a target to have at least 10% of the population globally vaccinated by September, 40% by December, and 70% by mid next year. These are global targets, but Georgia went even further, so because Georgia has as a target to vaccinate 60% of the population by the end of the year. Of course, this is welcomed, and we can only support this.
What is your advice on communicating and communication campaign, a proactive communication campaign from the government side, because we haven't seen that so far?
communication is very important. The reason maybe you say that you didn't see it so far is exactly because the number of vaccines was limited, so it's a bit dangerous to very much promote vaccination when you don't have what to offer. Now these efforts will be increased, and we as WHO, we are working very closely together with the European Union. We have special project on vaccinations, and we are working with NCDC and Ministry of Health. So far already 14 video spots have been produced, a lot of other materials, a lot of trainings prepared for journalists, mass media, and so on. And I'm sure these efforts now will be tripled.
I see the slogan, so to say, United Action for Better Health, a very nice slogan. What is your take on how COVAX is handling the distribution of vaccines?
There are many issues related to COVAX, and if you are informed about this, you know that the WHO has promoted COVAX from the very beginning very, very actively, and we still promote because this is the only way, for the time being, it's the only platform, the only channel that can ensure equitable distribution of the vaccines. One of the issues, the situation is like this now globally, and we are witnessing now another wave. Despite the number of vaccines, more than 3.5 billion vaccines have been administered. The situation is not improving exactly because of that, because for the time being, 80% of the vaccines have been administered in 10 countries, the richest countries in the world. So, and in the poorest countries, less than 1%. So, this unequal distribution of vaccines is maintaining this pandemic. The pandemic can be ended only if everybody will be protected. Nobody can be safe if anybody is safe.
This is happening despite the fact that COVAX exists.
COVAX exists, and for the time being, COVAX distributed a lot of vaccines equitably, exactly following this principle of equitable distributions. But of course, the number of vaccines that went through COVAX is much, much lower than those vaccines that have been delivered on bilateral agreements with producers.
When comes the time for the commercialization of vaccines?
For the same reason I just mentioned, it would be very dangerous to commercialize now vaccines because we need equitable access to vaccines. If we commercialize, again, only rich people will access vaccines, and then the poor people and the vulnerable population will never access those vaccines, or very rarely access those vaccines. And this is the most dangerous because according to WHO recommendation, we have prioritized groups for vaccinations, and we have to focus on those priority groups, but not on rich people to vaccinate. This will not help.
So you think it was right, the government's decision to be almost fully dependent on COVAX platform in the wake of COVID-19? Because we hear this criticism almost all the time that government could have negotiated better with suppliers and not be so fully dependent on COVAX platform.
As far as I know, and I was very closely in contact with all responsible person for this, the government of Georgia started from the very beginning and very early bilateral negotiations, and they were in parallel with the COVAX. So I don't think in this regard the government has lost time, and the government never relied 100% on COVAX. Also, the government supported COVAX, and Georgia was among the first countries in the world who became part of the COVAX. And under the COVAX, Georgia is self-financed country, and Georgia immediately paid for its obligations for the COVAX. Through the COVAX platform, more than 250,000 vaccines have been received so far, but doses have been received, and this will increase. And COVAX actually expects a significant increase in the second half of the year.
We have seen the first contours of 10-year development plan, and its healthcare part. The minister had the presentation. Are you advising on that, Georgia?
Not really on that one, on the 10th plan, but this 10 development plan reflects many other strategic documents that we are developing, because now we are collaborating with the Ministry on developing the National Health Strategy. And this is a big document, again, in partnership with the European Union, and the WHO and other partners, so we're developing this strategy. We worked very closely with the ministry to develop a concrete roadmap for primary healthcare reform in this country. And this is also another very big, important chunk. I already mentioned the new legislation on medicines, which is another very important element. And more recently now we initiate a big collaboration again, WHO, EU, Ministry of Health and other UN agencies on digital health, and all these are priorities that are reflected in that plan.
Are you generally for increasing the share of state in healthcare? Because we see some steps taken in that direction, right? Like state holdings, I don't know, like increasing budget coverage and so forth. And what is the role of the private sector in the overall system?
Yeah, we know that Georgia is a special case, because here it was massive privatization of the health sector. So no other country in this region has seen such privatization, total privatization of the health sector. And it's not that it's necessarily bad. So both private sector and public sector, they can play a role, and in many countries, so there are different combinations. But this is a unique combinations, because you have different types of private involvement, private sector involvement in the health sector, but here most of the private providers, they are all for profit. So in other countries you can have not-for-profit private involvement, you can have public-private partnerships, and you have different arrangements of public funding for private providers, private funding for public providers, vice versa. But here in Georgia, it's unique, because more than 80% of the healthcare providers are private and for profit. And it's, of course, in some cases, it creates problems. It creates problems for regulating this sector by the ministry, because it's private business, it's for-profit business, so there is no much interference. It can create problems in the crisis situations, like with COVID now, and we saw, because you have to mobilize very quickly beds for patients, severe patients with COVID. And then you have to negotiate with those private independent providers and the ministry. When the ministry has public hospitals under its own supervision, then it's much easier. And we saw what the ministry did. First of all, mobilized all those public hospitals and created additional.
Yes, but without private sector, it would have been impossible to manage this process.
This is absolutely true, but this was done through very tough negotiations and through paying serious bills. So it was not free of charge that the private sector just created those beds. And we also saw.
Do you think that with the state holding, it would have been free of charge?
Everything costs, of course.
Of course, that's my question.
But this is a problem when you have on the market both public and private providers, so the market gets healthier. So when you have everything monopolized, so it's not healthy. So the ministry created a network of public services. At the end, it's a good, because people can see alternatives on the market, and it's good. And then there could be a healthy competition between public and private. And then the ministry can also have a better idea on the costs of services for the time being. So the ministry just has to pay the bills that is imposed by private providers. So there are some good things in this, but of course the whole process has to be managed wisely, and these holdings that was created also has to be managed very well and transparently, and so on. So,
do you think that the system is and can be sustainable, and universal healthcare if we are very specific here, sustainable without incorporating private sector into it, for example, private insurers?
I don't misunderstand me. I didn't say that private sector has no place. A country like Georgia, when more than 80% of the providers are private, you cannot avoid not involving private sector. It's important how you involve the private sector, how you regulate the services prices, how you regulate services volume of services, and the quality of services in both public and private sectors.
Is quality healthcare cheap?
Quality healthcare cannot be cheap.
Definitely.
Yes.
My point.
Healthcare generally is not cheap.
Yes.
That's why we promote increased allocations for health, because it is necessary, and at the end it pays back, because there is no economic growth without a healthy population.
Elena, this week we were also lucky enough to have a chance to talk to Zaza Tsereteli, a Georgian advisor to the Royal Norwegian Ministry of Health and Care Services. Dr. Tsereteli was in Tbilisi for the short vacation, and of course we used this opportunity to host him here in Forbes Georgia studio on main challenges that the pandemic has brought to our country and globally. Mr. Tsereteli, thank you so much for taking the invitation on very such short notice, accepting our invitation. Happy to host you in our Forbes studio.
Big pleasure and honor, so thank you very much, because I've heard a lot about the Forbes, and now it's in Sakartvelo, so I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for this invitation.
Yeah, more than 10 years already.
Yeah, I am out of the Georgia more than 20 years.
So yeah. So, by the way, regarding that, our viewers and followers, for BMG, they're already aware about your participation in various projects. But as the same as you are the chief medical advisor for Norway government, but at the same time you participate in some other project for this particular country and others as well. Could you be so kind to update the Checkpoint viewers and followers regarding that? What's your occupation so far? What you are doing?
Senior advisor.
Senior advisor.
Yeah, this is how it's called. Yeah. So senior advisor for the Royal Norwegian Ministry of Health and Care Services. Yeah, it's a royal country, so that's why Tsereteli is also there.
Good point.
So in my duties, I have several duties. One of them is very important, is that at some point when there were some tensions between EU and Russia, EU somehow was thinking to find the ways how to deal with Russia. And then it was decided that maybe the health is one of the area where you can talk with the Russia and find out what's going on there. And it's more or less sensitive than some other issues. And I am an advisor
for this.
Yep, I'm an advisor. There are some directions. I was first 3 years I was advisor for HIV and AIDS. Then I was advisor for the prison health. And then because the prison health and drugs somehow are related, then it was a big interest from the Norwegian government to establish the special expert group on alcohol and substance abuse. So I'm now the coordinator and advisor for this expert group. And Norway is chairing this expert group, so I'm advisor for that. So there is also the Council of the Barents-Eurarctic Council. That's Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Russia again. But that's the regions which are around the Barents. There are also several working groups there, and one of the working group is working group on health. So I was for several years coordinator of the Barents-Eurarctic Council on TB, tuberculosis, then HIV and AIDS, and then 2 years ago, before the COVID started, I have initiated maybe we'll start to have a new program on e-health, because there are some rural areas far away, sparsely populated, and we need to bring health to them. So we started discussions and we established this new program, e-health, and then COVID came, and then everybody is now interested with the digital health. So now it's topic number one in all countries. And then Norway, Sweden are putting a lot of money, so it's a big interest. So I'm also then.
So it's been launched your initiative or not
Yes,
yet?
it was launched. It was launched by the foreign
It was
ministers.
supported as an idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So how to say? I'm one of the author of this program,
Yes.
and because of that, now I'm coordinator of the program.
Right. Finally, you are here in Tbilisi,
Yes.
in your homeland. Tsereteli is back to Georgia,
Yes.
and quite pleasure to have a peer-to-peer physical interview with you. But at the same time, we face quite difficult period. At the same time, it was predictable that this would or could happen. Where do we stand now as a country? It might be third, fourth, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Wave of the
yeah.
COVID. What is the status on behalf of COVID and epidemic of Georgia right now?
Yeah, we are now in a very difficult period of the COVID pandemic within the Georgia. There are several reasons behind of that. One reason is the virus itself, because it's developing and there are so many questions still and a lot of trying to find out what's going on. We have the new strains coming and coming, so the second problem with Georgia is that it was invented last year at the vaccines, and everybody thought that yes, vaccines will help. But for that you need to vaccinate people. But I think that the main problem behind of both of them, not virus, okay, but with the vaccination, I think there is one big problem which nobody wants to talk about.
Please.
For me, it's that we have a huge problem with the healthcare system itself.
Yeah.
And when you don't have healthcare system, strong one, then anything can be a problem. Even the vaccine distribution can become a problem because there is a big problem with the healthcare system.
Could we avoid the current status and the current situation if we could schedule or follow any kind of action plan, which was preliminarily suggested a few months ago, but nobody followed it and nobody was a part of it?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
I remember you participate personally few meetings with the Prime Minister and the General Council, or I'm sorry,
yes,
whatever it's called.
Yeah, but the point is that yes, I was participating in the meetings with the Prime Minister when Kaharia was Prime Minister, all these discussions. But there were discussions, and then there were also a group who was developing some program. When during our
which
discussions,
is a separate.
That's a separate one, yeah. And during these discussions, they were presenting the programs, and we could, comment on that. But we had no big influence on what this group was developing. But in your question, there was one very important aspect, which is the problem for the Georgian for years now. Then you have the plan, which does not work. And it's not only this, we have many examples of that.
But problem was the plan, but on Zaza, or implementation of the plan, or both of it?
For me, it's the plan. Why you have the problems of implementation? Because it's based on nothing.
Could we deal in advance with the situation happening in Georgia, July 2021, what is happening right now? Could we avoid or prevent the situation what we have right now?
Of course, we could.
How?
Yeah, as all other countries are doing. They're learning on their mistakes. They're learning on what was happening in 2020.
Did we learn anything last 500 days?
Yeah, it's a very difficult, I'm always fighting for my country when I'm abroad, and I don't like to criticize it when I'm abroad because, yeah, it's my country. And I'm always saying that there are problems. Yes, of course, we could avoid what we have right now very easily. No, not very easily. Yeah, you can avoid. Even you have difficulties in your health system itself, but still you can avoid. And I think one of the biggest problems we have also inside of the healthcare system is the transparency, the openness. Because
that's why maybe we need to talk more.
Yeah, because what the pandemic brought, everybody is afraid. So many questions. And when there are so many questions, you need to talk with each other. You need to talk with your people.
Yeah,
otherwise.
Uncertainty prevails, yeah. But on the, while I will move to healthcare system, do you remember any any cases similar to Georgia, where do we stand right now?
Yes.
How other countries could deal with it? I mean, like in the same situation what we have right now, we just face the same problems what is happening. Half of Australia is under lockdown
yeah.
now, and things are happening. But similarity with Georgian reality for July 2021.
Yeah, I'm very, how to say, I don't like to make these comparisons because all countries are different, but we have such a big problem with the vaccines, with such a big problem of the procurement of the vaccines, that you can think that we are like in some African countries who have the problems, because countries from our region, from ex-Soviet countries, they more or less, they all managed to get not enough, let's say 100%, but they have managed to get enough vaccines
to proceed with the vaccination.
Yes. Yeah. And for me, for example, one problem is that if you remember, then Georgia, Sakartvelo was preparing the program to submit to the COVAX. The deadline was January 18, let's say 12 p.m.
That's it.
And we submitted our proposal at 12 p.m. when all other countries have submitted it 2, 3, 4 weeks before. We made it on the last minute, and when you see now the program, it doesn't work.
At the same time, we rely only on COVAX by that period. Am I right? We did not have any kind of bilateral attempts to
that was
have these talks of vaccines.
Sure, that was the problem.
And it is still a problem.
You know, and that is also another problem for the Georgia. We are not, as I mentioned at once with you, that we are not proactive, we're retroactive. You need to think that maybe COVAX goes bankruptcy. So what we are doing?
What is the alternative?
Where is the plan B and plan C? You need to have several plans because it's a pandemic. That was the situation that nobody expected. And then everybody know that how many people were in the world? 8 billion. How many vaccines we need to have? 8 billion.
We didn't have these alternative plans. It's not so complicated to calculate how many vaccines do we need to reach 60% of the immunized population of Georgia, which means it's around 19,000, 20,000 daily jabs.
Yeah.
Daily jabs since today, and which means approximately 3.3 million vaccines. What we have so far by NCDC is 1.5 million vaccines already confirmed as stopped in Georgia. This is still an ongoing problem because of timing. What do you think, or because of some?
No, it is
because mental problems. Georgia is not unique in these regards. Maybe we have more or less with some other countries, but
there is one problem here. Again, we're talking a lot about problems, but the problem is that there is unclarity when and how much vaccines we will get. For example, me and you, we would like to be vaccinated. Yeah, my country comes and says, you know, the week 41 we will get 100,000. The week 42 we will get another 100,000. And so we know that the country is working to get the vaccines. What we have right now in Sakartvelo is that the vaccines will come. Will come. Maybe will not come. Will come in September or will come in October. Every day is important, especially now with the Delta vaccine, because it's just time is running.
Okay, then taking into consideration that we were out of stocks. Well, we didn't have vaccines. It's officially declared by the government itself. Was that a mistake to skip all the restrictions, just to eliminate all of them, to open all the borders, what I remember, all the borders, while we have just 100,000 or 150,000 vaccinated personnel?
If we take, for example, the United Kingdom, just an example, where the more than 55% are now vaccinated. The UK had a plan of plan how to open the country.
Step by step.
Step by step. And step number 4, the last step, was planned to be on 20th of June.
Okay.
And then the week before, 20th of June, suddenly all advisors to the Boris Johnson, they told him that, you know, Delta is coming. We have more and more cases with the Delta, and Delta is spreading very fast. Let's postpone
Why
this
don't we postpone the
and
final step?
try to use this time to vaccinate as
More
much as possible. And they postponed it until yesterday, until July 19. So even UK, knowing that they have vaccines, a lot,
Well,
and they are vaccinating
AstraZeneca-
500 and 600,
AstraZeneca,
yeah, 600 per day. They said, no, let's wait. What we have done, no vaccines,
opening all the borders.
yeah, and then saying, okay, why? What restrictions? Yes, somebody can tell that this was because of economical situation and the tourism needs to have
That's
some
how it was
injection.
explained.
Yes,
And summer season because of masks.
yes. That
And
was,
elimination, by the way, all the penalties, remember?
yeah, yes.
Which
that's-
was during this previous...
Yeah. But I told them once and repeated. There was a famous letter written by Swiss financists last year in October, who were demanding from the Swiss government to continue lockdown. And why? Because they said that if we open right now,
Oh, anything
yeah,
like
it's famous. They said if we open it right now, the people come and they started to work, and our economy is booming. But the virus gives us that these people will be injured or don't know, so infected. Yeah, maybe after 2 months we will have nobody to work. So that will be bigger catastrophe for our economy.
economies. And
So let's
economy.
try to keep it, because why you need economy if there is nobody to work there?
And my final question is, do we still any kind of uncertainty for the further steps? What should be taken in Georgia just in this period, or it's already a part of math and statistics, what we will have in the nearest month, because of our stocks, because of our speed in regards of vaccination and implementation of non-existing action plan?
Yeah, we need to say the vaccines are very important, but you need to have also some other aspects, which is so-called this non-pharmaceutical, and that is the masks, social distancing, working from home, and so on and so on and so on. So this needs to be somehow brought back. It is very difficult because, as you have mentioned, when the penalties was abolished, then I can say, okay.
Yeah, tomorrow I might.
Yeah, okay, they will penalty me again, then they say, okay, no worries, after 1 month.
It's going to be anyway eliminated.
The biggest problem, but then the countries, when they are deciding what to do, they're also taking into account the cultural background or how we are. Yeah? We are South people, and one of the biggest problem in Georgia is that we like these big gatherings. Then we like the 20, 40, 50 people coming
Which is
together.
constantly happening.
Yeah. Already last year, many countries, first restriction was, for example, it was restriction also in Norway. Not more than 5 persons can meet, and not more than from 2 households. Finish.
How it was monitored in Norway? It was a part of the culture and
That was the
population.
part of the culture.
But
Then
at
the
the
people.
same time, if there were definitely some cases which were upper than 5%.
That was a case with the Norwegian
Police?
Prime Minister.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
She went for her birthday,
And?
and
Yeah, correct. I remember that.
and then she was punished. And what was interesting? The penalty was the bigger than original. And why it was bigger? Because the justice said that you are the
Prime
person who made this decision. So you need to be. And she accepted it immediately.
Financial
of course.
penalty. Yeah.
And to find a finish is because what I like in Norway and what's the Nordic difference from others, yeah, which came out very importantly during the pandemic, and that is what we are lacking. That's a trust. That's a trust between private person, business, and government.
Which creates
They
the most
all
important
trust
confidence.
each-
Yeah.
Of course. And in pandemic, you need to trust, because when government makes decision, for example, to restrict something, if you are not following it, you don't trust them.
Without
Then,
confidence, it's going to be
course.
very difficult to.
of course.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zel. Great to have and host you here.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and I hope that maybe next year we will have other talks out of the pandemic.
Covering in other topics. Thank you till then.
Thank you.
And
Thanks a lot.
After the context well explained in both of these interviews, Georgi, let us now turn to the economic toll of the pandemic. This time, let us analyze the sector that was hardest hit by COVID-19, and that's hotels. Summer vacations are approaching us as well, one Sunday away practically. So let us hear the voice of the hotel industry. Tatia Kakiashvili worked hard to gather these voices for the checkpoints.
According to the latest data, the hotel price index increased by 6.4% in 1 month. Annually, this increase is 1.5%. As the representatives of the hotel sector explain, these numbers mean that the workload of hotels this year is higher than it was in 2020. The average price of 3-star hotels in Georgia is 136 Georgian lari. Night stay for 2 people at 4-star hotels costs 243 Georgian lari, and the average price of family-type hotels in June was 21 lari. As for the 5-star hotels, their average price in June was 496 Georgian lari. By rankings, Guria is a leader with the average price of a standard 2-bedroom, 739 lari, in Tbilisi 644, in Kakheti 470, and in Ajara 457 Georgian lari. The reason why we have a slightly different situation this year compared to the same period last year is the lighter COVID regulations. This is what hotel business consultant Georgi Dolidze says. According to him, after the removal of the regulations, the amount of bookings in Georgia has almost tripled, and as 5-star as family-type hotels are already operating at a high capacity.
Prices are almost at the point it was in 2019. Batumi is especially noteworthy. If we look at the prices of 5-star hotels in Batumi, we will see $200, $280, which indicates that the load is quite high. Tourism, and especially international tourism, has awakened in the country.
Traditionally, family-type hotels offer relatively low prices to customers. However, these hotels are trying to maintain the current price until the end of September, despite the fact that hotel costs are rising.
In our hotels in June, July, there is one price around 170, 190 Georgian lari, but there are some benefits for organizations and Georgian vacationers. As for the pre-pandemic summer, prices at our family hotel have not increased since 2020. The cost is very high in terms of share, but since this is the first summer that the load is higher, we try to offer the same prices to the customers.
As it became known to the checkpoints, the booking and occupancy rate in the hotel paragraph is very close to the pre-pandemic level. Moreover, June 2021 turned out to be the busiest for the hotel during its 4-year existence. At the same time, despite the fact that the services of paragraph are mainly intended for Georgian vacationers, recently the hotel has been hosting many foreign citizens.
June was very successful. We closed this month with one of the best results in the 4-year history of the hotel. The workload maintained quite high in July too. The hotel is almost fully occupied. Our forecasts for August are also very promising. Of course, all of this has to do with one condition, COVID infection, and the extent to which the country and the world will maintain the existing regulations so that the new infection rates are not high.
So, tourism in the country is slowly starting to rebound, and we can hope that both local vacationers and tourists entering Georgia this year will be able to relax following the COVID regulations. Otherwise, no one knows how difficult the epidemic situation will be in September.
Actually, we have gathered some more and even more voices from the business communities. They are assessing the environments that we have currently in the wake of very grave events in Georgia. that we have talked about last Sunday. That's uncurbed violence in Tbilisi streets, that's strict comments from EU, from the US Department of State, that's so-called Charles Michel Agreement has been breached by hasty appointments of Supreme Court judges in Georgia, and that this might cost Georgia 60 million euro. This is the volume of the next tranche of the EU's assistance to Georgia.
Yes, Georgi, you mentioned the U.S. Department of State, and this week they have released a report on Georgia's investment climate 2021. The report stresses the government's commitment to property right protection and business-friendly policies such as low taxes, but also pledges to invest in human capital and to strive for inclusive growth across the country. The program also emphasizes Georgia's geographic potential as a trade and logistics hub across the new Silk Road linking Asia and Europe via the Caucasus. Overall, business and investment conditions are sound. However, there is an increasing lack of confidence in the judicial sector's ability to adjudicate commercial cases independently or in a timely, competent manner, with some business dispute cases languishing in the court system for years. Other companies complain of inefficient decision-making processes at the municipal level, shortcomings in the enforcement of intellectual property rights, lack of effective antitrust policies, accusations of political meddling, selective enforcement of laws and regulations, including commercial laws, and difficulties resolving disputes over property rights. The Georgian government continues to work to address these issues, and despite these remaining challenges, Georgia ranks high in the region as a good place to do business, the document reads.
Besides, the report focuses on the independence of Georgia judiciary, and political interference in the judicial system remains problematic. Concerns regarding the integrity of the judicial appointment process and the capacity of the courts to deliver quality outcomes continue to affect investor confidence in the court system. The report highlights that the existing framework for adjudication of civil disputes in Georgian courts nonetheless continues to suffer from several significant problems despite the reforms. Foremost of these are persisting concerns with the independence, accountability, and capacity of the High Council of Justice and the Judiciary. Many investors perceive Georgia's court processes as slow, inefficient, lacking in transparency, and hampered by a lack of technical expertise. All these issues affect public trust in the judicial system. They are among the most pressing concerns for the investors in their assessments of the investment climate in Georgia.
One more precise emphasis in this report is on the Anaklia Deep Sea project. In 2016, the government awarded the contract to build a new port in Anaklia to a group of international investors, including a US company. However, the government terminated its contract with the group for the development of a deep sea port in 2020. The investor group alleges government actions against the project led to financial difficulties and eventual contract termination. Despite the government's claim that it remains committed to the construction of a deep sea port in Anaklia, investors and local business leaders doubt that commitment, the report reads. Let us remind our viewers and followers, Georgi, that in January 2020, the Georgian government terminated the contract with the Anaklia Development Consortium, which was followed by an appeal to the arbitration court by the consortium, as well as one of its investors, Bob Mayer.
Correct. The ADC, the Anaklia Development Consortium, disputes that the destructive steps taken by the Georgian government have halted the implementation of this infrastructure project, which has caused significant financial losses to the investors. In December 2020, the Minister of Economy, Natia Turnava, said that the document of economic justification for the project should be prepared afresh. After the preparation of this document, it was expected to announce a new international tender.
So let us then hear the voices of the business community and what they have to say about the current business environment.
Yeah.
July turned out to be quite a difficult month, both in terms of the epidemiological situation and the current political processes. Added to this is the fact that the Euro and the United States expressed concern over the approval of 6 candidates for the Supreme Court by the Parliament of Georgia on July 12th, because this contradicts the Charles Michel agreement reached on April 19 between the ruling and opposition parties. Clearly, similar political decisions and the tense situation in the country have a negative impact on the local business environment, hampering foreign investors from investing in this country.
The nature of our economy is such that direct investment is our salvation. If there are no foreign direct investments, even in this case, a balance can be struck, but $1 will cost 50 Georgian lari and we will be completely impoverished. Georgian Dream is again using EU assistance for political purposes, bribing people and exercising political corruption. That is why I prefer not to have such help either. The statement of high-ranking representatives to our country in any form, in a negative context, be it a warning, a concern, etc., will certainly affect the investors who want to enter our country. Investors will not come from the West, from Europe, not even from America, but from our neighborhood, where democratic values are not important. But the question is, where do we as a country want to go? I, as a business representative, very negatively assess the events that are happening to us because this is not the country, the society where we can succeed.
Shortly after the events in Georgia, investors have already asked questions about what's happening in our country. Georgi Chugoshvili, the co-founder of Georgian startup Faber, is one of the entrepreneurs who has already received this question from an American investor.
This is an angel investor who makes his own personal investments. The story also reached this person in a very short time, which gives me the suspicion that the current events in Georgia reached many people in a rather negative context. The consequences that this may have is the long run can have a very long-lasting impact on the image of our country. Investors want their money and investments to be in an environment where they can defend their positions, ensure justice.
Meanwhile, the growing COVID statistics in the country and the low vacation rate of the population remain a challenge for the smooth operation of businesses. Business operators say a similar situation also hinders making healthy future predictions.
During these couple of weeks, we have seen that the virus is spreading, and the most undesirable outcome here is that we do not have any stable prognosis. There is uncertainty, and this is also very damaging, which is coupled with the very slow dynamics of vaccination. And this is, of course, unacceptable for the businesses to operate in a more or less certain ways.
If we will have cases of our employees, it means that we have to stop our production. It means that delay of shipments, because delay of shipments as a local market, therefore the export, as you know, we are operating in more than 30 different countries. We have up to 70 different partners in those countries. And delay of the shipment means that the dramatical losses of the sales.
It's still unknown what the consequences of the epidemiological situation will be, although the gradual political instability is further complicating the situation. Businessmen are approaching the government to create conditions in the country that will allow Georgia to operate normally in a competitive environment in terms of investment.
It is impossible to imagine the development and prosperity of the country's economy and business without fundamental values. Do not imagine that if we do not pay attention to this violence, the same thing will not happen to any of us tomorrow. Of course, this affects the investment climate of the country. We will feel the effect in the coming months more clearly. Investments in the country have already declined. There are many reasons. It depends on the investments we will create in the country and how many people we employ. We should try not to aggravate the situation further.
All the situation which is in Georgia right now after the 5 of July's event, it has a huge impact on the whole society and the economy of Georgia. So we, as a leader in jewelry business in Georgia, of course, we feel that, and the impact is, as to say, not so good. So we feel that the market and the crisis, the economic crisis, which is due to pandemic and other things in Georgia, we can feel it, and of course the dynamic is not so good.
One thing we can say for sure is that the current business environment is unpredictable for investors, political tensions adding to the uncertainty that COVID-19 has already brought to the world and to Georgia as well.
And with the current IMF's last review of its extended fund facility and the recent report will come to where we have started, since the main risk that this most influential financial institution states to the economic recovery is the lack of vaccination.
You're completely right, Georgi. Even though the fund has doubled Georgia's economic growth forecast for 2021 from 3.5% to 7.7%, and we can listen to arguments in an interview with the new head of mission, James John, in a minute. Besides upside factors, there are downside factors as well, although not included in the baseline scenario, like the lack of vaccination that you just mentioned, Georgi. Mr. John says that political instability is something the IMF keeps on its radar very closely. Oh, Mr. John, thank you for being with us and taking our questions. I watched the meeting online, and IMF has doubled the economic growth for Georgia, reaching the target that the government of Georgia has also for 2021, and that's 7.7%, the highest so far that I see in respect to other IFIs. What is the reason behind this decision? And I'm asking you this because when I talked with EBRD, for example, which has the lowest outlook for growth so far, this institution told me that it would be impossible to have higher projections before the detailed analysis of the recent growth structure was available. What makes the IMF optimistic about Georgia's economic growth?
First off, thank you for speaking with me today. The COVID crisis took a heavy toll on the economy with a 6.2% contraction in 2020, and this is the largest we've seen since the 1990s. The government appropriately took measures to support vulnerable businesses and households, but it's been a difficult crisis. So then, turning to the 2021 forecast, as you mentioned, we see the forecast. The growth has gained impressive momentum in the second quarter, and I think as you're alluding to, this reflects some flash GDP releases, and indeed we do look forward to seeing more detail. But in the past, the flash GDP releases have been quite good indicators of economic growth, and so we take those into account. When we look at them, we see pretty broad-based strength, and so there's across the economy, the main factor that goes into the flash GDP releases are VAT turnover. And that suggests that there's pretty strong activity across the economy. Some of the factors that are supporting the strong growth or the upgrade in growth, strong remittances, exports, and early signs of a rebound in tourism. And I would say, maybe to think about this a little bit, during the pandemic, a lot of people were not going out and spending, so there's likely some pent-up demand. We've also heard in talking to lots of people that there's more domestic tourism activity than there used to be. So when we look at the April and May numbers, those are quite strong, and that's what contributes to this 7.7% growth forecast. you know, if you look at what the Ministry of Finance has submitted to the Parliament with the budget, they have an optimistic scenario, and they think it's possible growth could be even stronger. We're comfortable where we are with 7.7% based on what we've seen. But as more data come out, we will take that into account, and if needed, we revise our forecast. While our forecast has been upgraded substantially, it is important to note that there are significant downside risks, and we have sort of an environment of greater than usual uncertainty. And so I think you've seen perhaps in the statement, you know, progress in securing vaccines, accelerating vaccinations. These are key to controlling the pandemic. And we have challenges such as the Delta variant, you know, and Georgia right now is a country that does not have a high level of vaccination. So that is a key risk. And I want to highlight that just controlling the pandemic is really important for realizing strong economic outturns.
Visit of the mission and work of the mission has been, even though online, it has been in a quite stressful environment in Georgia. You are aware what's going on currently politically in Georgia, and of course I'm not going to ask you to make political comments here, but since you mentioned the COVID-19 and also the uncertainty that it has brought to Georgia and to the whole world, such examples like, I don't know, even one harmed tourist because of the uncurbed violence in Tbilisi streets. Does this add also to the uncertainty that we have been speaking about, and are such factors like factored in, and do you view such things also as downside risks to the 7.7% economic growth that we have been mentioning?
Thank you for your question, and maybe I could start by saying, you know, like others, we are saddened by recent events, including the death of a television cameraman, Lexo Lashkarova. We offer our condolences to his family. You know, as noted in our concluding statement, if there were renewed political uncertainty, this could affect investment and confidence. So, you know, it's sort of not surprising that political stability is important for economic stability and growth. So we include that as a potential risk. If I were to say, look back, if you think back to the last elections, after which there was sort of a long political standoff, that can affect the ability of the parliament to undertake important reforms. It doesn't help the ability to move forward in sort of key economic policy areas. So, you know, we do highlight that as a risk. That's not in our baseline. As I said, we have a pretty strong growth forecast, but we do highlight that the number one risk, as I said, is the pandemic and the potential that gets worse, or that vaccinations don't pick up as quickly as we need. That's sort of the main area of risk. But after that, we do mention the potential for renewed political uncertainty, and that this is another thing to keep on the radar screen.
Yes, thank you. And also, to be more precise, this 7.7% of the economic growth, this figure does not envisage any like major lockdown, right?
Exactly. So we do a forecast, and the time we do the forecast, that's our baseline view, what we think is most likely to happen. And then we highlight, and so that's 7.7% growth for this year, for 2021. And then we highlight, potential risks to that forecast. And I think the most important risk we see to the forecast is if the pandemic worsens, and that could be because of the variants I mentioned, or if, vaccination progress isn't as fast as hoped. These are things that could affect the forecast. There can be upside risks as well, although I think we've factored in more of those in raising our forecast. So we've seen strong activity early, I guess in the second quarter of 2021. And so we're factoring in to an extent things like, pent up demand, that there's stronger consumer spending and businesses rebuilding inventories, et cetera. More of that's probably in the forecast. So then we have a few downside risks that we have highlighted in our concluding statement.
IMF's comments, IMF's advices, decisions have always been kind of like an anchor for other financial institutions as well. For example, Georgia's judicial reform came to the global agenda after the IMF had consistently included it among the structural reforms needed to ensure the appealing business environment, also among, of course, many other reasons. Today, we hear from the EU very clearly that another tranche for Georgia's support, which is about 60 million euro, is at stake because of the judicial reform not meeting the standards of the recent agreement. And this criticism is also shared by the US Department of State. What is IMF's take on that?
Sure, thank you for your question. So we'd leave it to the EU to determine whether its conditions for financial support have been met, including with respect to judiciary reforms. There are a number of conditions attached to the EU financial assistance. But maybe to step back, having a transparent, efficient, and impartial judicial system is important for the business environment, for attracting investment, and for strong private sector-led growth. And other development partners, counterparts we spoke to during the mission, and international assessments have highlighted the importance of judiciary reforms. And accordingly, we encourage the government to make progress in this area to strengthen the business environment. So I think maybe that is the key point to take away, that having an effective, impartial, transparent judiciary is very important for the business environment. And so we have encouraged progress in this area.
What are the main areas where IMF sees that the government of Georgia needs counseling, needs recommendations and advice?
Coming out of the pandemic, there are a lot of challenges. And so, one of them is undertaking fiscal adjustment while managing fiscal pressures and risks to comply with the fiscal rule. We view the fiscal rule as an important anchor for credibility. Another is further advancing on state-owned enterprise reform. This is an area that the government has made good progress in the past, and there's more that can be done. Strengthening public investment management is another priority, particularly as the government is spending quite a bit on capital projects. So these are things like infrastructure, highways, et cetera. And as hopefully the pandemic recedes, we see an opportunity to reinvigorate structural reform progress. And so this could be to address issues such as high unemployment and inequality. And these are longstanding challenges in Georgia, but the crisis has made them worse. And so we think these are areas where more can be done. And then, maybe just back also on the macro environment, another priority is to make sure inflation comes down. We think the National Bank of Georgia is doing a good job there. We support its policy stance, but to bring inflation back down toward target. And also to maintain very strong financial sector regulation and supervision. Georgia did, quite a bit to help cushion the blow of the crisis because it was in a better position coming in. And that reflected a lot of policy work before the crisis. And so rebuilding those buffers and making sure that there's still strong financial regulation and supervision, those are key priorities.
Is the IMF helping Georgia, government of Georgia, with the 10-year development plan, Mr. John?
So on the 10-year development plan, like I said, we've just had the Article 4 consultations. And we discussed sort of the broad range of economic policy issues that affect the country. And very good dialogue, very candid, excellent exchanges. And we expect that many of the topics we discussed with the government will be part of the development plan. Mm-hmm. These include, fiscal plans to enable spending on key development priorities such as education and infrastructure. But we are not advising on the details of the plan itself.
I hope you will at some point, because the contours that have been presented by the government so far from the first sight seem that they are adding more burden to the state budget while projecting average economic growth at 5%, 5.2%. I was listening to you during the conference today, and you had this very specific focus on the need for a fiscal consolidation and on the need to more sound macroeconomic environment. When should Georgia's government start taking these steps, and do you think it is realistic to respond to the fiscal rule by 2023?
So, as I had said earlier, the government responded appropriately during the crisis to provide households and businesses with support to minimize the human and economic impact of this, unprecedented crisis. And it's just natural with these expenses and the decline in revenue as the economy contracted, that the deficit and public debt, rose sharply. This is what we expect. One reason this wasn't so concerning is Georgia has a fiscal rule and they've been strongly committed to it, and that's a real anchor. And it gave a sense that this was a temporary, increase in the deficit and the debt, and we're very encouraged to see the strong commitment from the government to complying with the fiscal rules. So this is by 2023 getting the deficit below fiscal deficit below 3% of GDP and making sure debt is below 60% of GDP. The debt we expect will be below 60% of GDP well before 2023, but so the real challenge is to bring the deficit down. Some COVID-19 related costs, so there's understandably a lot of temporary costs to respond to the crisis. These should go away when the pandemic ends, but the government will still need to identify further revenue or saving measures, and we have some recommendations. So we recommend saving revenue windfalls if growth and revenue are stronger than expected this year. We recommend undertaking a tax expenditure review and strengthening tax administration, both of which could yield additional revenue. We recommend strengthening public investment management to boost the efficiency of capital spending. This is what I mentioned before, sort of a lot of the infrastructure investment that's going on to make sure that these are high quality investments that have a good return for growth. And also really taking into account spending pressures and risks when formulating budgets. So, we see some potential spending pressures in areas such as aging, this is health and pensions, education, and we see risks from state-owned enterprises and also potentially in the energy sector. The government's fiscal risk statements have done a good job highlighting these risks. And so to control some of these, we would suggest, taking action on SOE reform, and also specifying in advance clear criteria in the power sector for any deviations from feed-in premiums. We are confident the commitment is very strong from the government. We do think that they can meet the requirements of the fiscal rule by 2023.
If the government starts taking consistent steps in this direction of fiscal consolidation, but on the other hand, we see that the outlook on inflation has also doubled, right? Almost doubled. So, and NBG sticks to the strict monetary policy, which is right policy, as you have also mentioned. Then is 7.7% economic growth still reachable?
Yes. So our 7% forecast does reflect, for example, the recent monetary policy increases by the National Bank of Georgia. We are not at this time calling for any further rate increases. We think that the National Bank of Georgia has responded appropriately to the increase in inflation. And it stands ready to do more if needed, but that's not in our baseline. We see the inflation, the factors driving inflation is largely temporary. And so it is important to be vigilant and make sure that these temporary factors don't translate into more lasting inflation. But as I said, we think they're temporary. Our forecast has inflation coming down significantly in 2022 as some of these temporary factors fade. There are a lot of aspects to inflation that are very volatile. So like food and energy prices can be quite volatile. Often we look at core inflation, which should give a slightly more stable read on what's going on with price developments. And the last two core inflation readings have both come down a little bit. So it's a small improvement, but it's something that gives us a little bit of confidence that, as I said, that these factors are temporary and that there should be a reduction in inflation in 2022.
Okay, and my last question, should we wait for the next program between the IMF and Georgia? It would, for me, show if the government is really ready for fiscal consolidation as well.
As I said, we've just completed our Article 4 consultations, and this is a great chance to continue our close dialogue and discuss challenges and policy priorities. This is not a program negotiation, but I will say in a second, there are a lot of policy areas where we see sort of broad common views with our counterparts in the government and at the National Bank of Georgia. The Minister of Finance said very clearly that they would like another program. And so, we stand ready to discuss a new program, and that negotiation happens separately than this Article 4 mission, but we are ready to do it. We are not negotiating a program now, so I can't tell you exactly what will be in it, but we shared these views with the government, with the NBG So I think there's a good sort of common understanding that can provide a basis for a future program.
Wonderful. Then there's the reason for our next interview as well.
We'll look forward to our next interview, and hopefully in Tbilisi.
Yes, hopefully in Tbilisi.
Well, and still not to lose some optimism, let us showcase an APP Biliki to our viewers and followers, the business that was created in February 2020, and then in March the pandemic hit the country and worldwide.
Yes, however, this app and Biliki team withstand the pressure of its newly created startup, and even though quite a number of attempts to raise money during the pandemic fell short of their expectations, they still managed not only to survive, but even to develop further.
So, here is a powerful story from Biliki and, of course, Salome Chipashvili.
Tony Katsiramova, founder of Biliki app. Biliki is a Georgian startup of travel itineraries. It helps on the one hand travelers to easily and quickly plan their trips and enhance travel experience while traveling. Besides, we decided in 2018 with my brother to launch this startup in order, in fact, that we saw a global opportunity of rapidly increasing tourism industry. So we decided to use this opportunity and to launch the application. And the Biliki is already available since 2020, February, and it's already launched on Play Store and App Store as well. The first investment was a family investment, as it's supposed to be for startup. We invested about $11,000. That was our starting point for us. Well, obviously we had a couple of negotiations with international investors that they were ready to launch, to invest in our Biliki app. But obviously, just very soon, COVID-19 stuck to the world, so that stopped development of the Biliki in case of development, in case of marketing campaigns, in case of investments. So we particularly stopped, we stuck during pandemic situation, but we managed to push ourselves, and we participated in different range of international and local startup programs, accelerating programs that helped us kind of to build the application, to finish the application development. Despite COVID-19, we have an increasing number of active users. We have around more than 5,000 up to 6,000 active users, but it's drastically increasing monthly. We have already launched a new feature, Add Your Business, Add Your Place in Biliki app for free. So we obviously help this industry, tourism industry, which is quite in crisis during pandemic situation. So we help them to publish their places, their businesses in our the most popular Georgian itineraries in order to attract new customers and deliver this opportunity to tourism industry to increase rapidly after COVID-19 crisis. Besides, we plan already this August to launch new marketplace feature that will be available in summer this year, that will be available for every person, like adventure lovers, also tourism industry, to promote their tours, to publish their tours, and to sell to others, and to get additional income while traveling. So obviously this is the most unique thing for Biliki app, which is not available for other competitive applications of Biliki. So we give this opportunity to Biliki to promote this feature, and this feature will give us opportunity to be a part of global market. Obviously, this year we already will be available on Eastern Europe, European market as well, in our region, Caucasus region, and step by step to become a part of global tourism industry.
Well, this is all for today, I guess.
Yes, before Guillaume Moulard's traditional interesting contribution to the checkpoints.
But before that, we have something to remind our viewers and followers, Georgi.
Yeah, yes, and that's definitely to follow us on BMG and Forbes.j.
Yes, thank you, Georgi. And you, my dears, please stay and enjoy. Guillaume has worked hard for you.
We'll meet on Sunday. Till then, bye.
Kamajoba. Today I'm going to speak about something that you might even have never heard about. A proven medical technique which has been discovered in France more than 100 years ago in 1917 at the Pasteur Institute. Following in this use with the discovery of antibiotics, phage therapy can indeed cure from different and several infections. And Georgia is one of the only countries in the world to still use this method professionally. Why Georgia? Are there a lot of foreigners coming here in Biliki to be healed by phage therapy? How much does it cost? Is it efficient, and in which cases? Follow me to Eliava Institute in Sabutalo, which is taking care about foreigners as well as Georgian patients.
Yeah, the Institute has really very long traditions and history. It was established in 1923 by Georgi Eliava and Felix Durel, who was one of the discoverers of the phage phenomenon. He was French-Canadian, working in the Institut Pasteur. And Eliava, at that time, he was the head of the Institute of Bacteriology, which was already on the place. So the government sent Georgi Eliava into Institut Pasteur in order to develop some vaccines and vaccinology, where he met with Felix Durel, who was already working on bacteriophages. And Eliava started to work. He became very much interested in the phages. And these two people, two scientists, became very close friends, and they decided to create World Center of Bacteriophage Study and Application. Eliava invited Durel in Tbilisi. Durel have been here 3 times actually. In total, he spent more than 1 year here. He had his own laboratory, and so it was great and very ambitious idea to have the World Center of Phage Study and Application. So it started in this way. As soon as it developed in Georgia, Georgia was the part of the Soviet Union, so it started from Georgia, but then it was spreading in entire country. So, and Georgia was the leading institution in this regard. So it was the Institute of Bacteriophages. Before it was named as the Institute of Vaccines and Sera. So the mainstream was production of the biological products, including vaccines, diagnosticums, sera for treatment, and also identification of some pathogens for diagnostic services. But then it became that the very important activity of the Institute was bacteriophages. Bacteriophages for treatment and also for prophylactic purposes. So the Institute was serving entire Soviet Union with the biological products, including the phages. So one of the biggest consumer of the phages was Soviet Army. They were using phages for diarrheal diseases for prophylactic purposes. So it was very big and very strong center of biological production. Before discovery of the antibiotics, it was very traditional and very widespread everywhere, not only in the Soviet Union, but other countries as well. In France, in Germany, in the US, there were several companies who were using phages for human and also animal diseases. But after the adventure or discovery of the antibiotics, then West forgot about phages. But it developed in the former Soviet Union as a very strong remedy against bacterial infections. Of course, later antibiotics were introduced in the country, but the phage therapy and phages was really very important part of the healthcare system in Soviet Union. We have really very substantial traditions because it has been started from Georgia, and we are trying to pass this information from generation to generation. So this is very unique. We have people who have been even working during the Soviet time, who has really substantial knowledge and experience. So we are trying to pass it to the new generations, and it seems that we are doing well because we have some know-how how to prepare very effective phage preparations which are working against bacterial pathogens, and we know how to do it, and our experience really supporting our everyday activities even now. It's coming from the previously from the Soviet Union, so it was easy somehow for the national authorities to give the permission for the phages. Yes, we have permission of our production, phage production. We have phages are approved as a pharmaceutical agents by the Georgian Ministry of Healthcare. So our phage therapy have the special license to use phages. Our pharmacy have special license to prepare phages for the personalized treatment for patients. So it's approved and it's part of the care, standard care in Georgia. So we have several components here at the Eliava. So we have a state institution, which is Eliava Institute of Bacteriophages, Microbiology and Virology. And you know, as any scientific institute, we have also our struggles to get the finances. Of course, finances for the state institution is not very high, and we are time by time participating in the international competitions and grants. We are writing grants, participating in the competitions in order to get some additional funding. Also, we have very close collaboration with our partners outside of the country, in the EU, in the US. So we have quite strong relations and collaboration with our collaborators and partners. Also, very interesting component that we have foundation here, which we created. So institute's employees of the institute created foundation, and then foundation is a founder of the spin-off company. So it's a big family, and the companies are trying to commercialize the products or services which are created by the institute. So it's quite a big family which are mainly focused on the phage study and application in the different directions.
We have several varieties of phages. These are phages that work on a wide range of bacteria. We call these standard phages that kill Staphylococci, Streptococci, and many other very common bacteria. However, there is a group of bacteria on which these standard phages, the so-called wide range of phages, do not work. We have excellent ways of designing individual phages, so-called autophages, for specific bacteria that are not included in the wide range of standard phages. Phages work on specific diseases, especially chronic diseases caused by bacterial infections. Phages work against these bacteria. However, in addition to the pure antibacterial effect, phages have other function mechanisms, for instance, anti-inflammatory effects. This is a very interesting function mechanism. The main advantage of phages over antibiotics is that phages selectively kill only pathogenic bacteria. They do not negatively affect non-pathogenic bacteria. This is a very big advantage.
I saw a report on the French TV a few years ago that was talking about bacteriophages and phage therapy, and I found out that it was only in Georgia. Okay, it was a very interesting topic, and then I checked a little bit and I found that nobody from the Western countries dared to come to this faraway country that nobody really knows. So I had the idea to open an incoming travel agency in Georgia and to help Western citizens to be healed, to be treated with phages in Georgia. Mostly they come from France, as I'm French, from Germany, from Canada, from Netherlands. Phage therapy can heal most of the bacterial diseases. It can be urinary, pulmonary disease, infection. It can be osteitis. It can be anywhere on a wound or whatever. Just in France, 15,000 people die per year because of multi-resistant bacteria, and 40,000 people are amputated because of multi-resistant bacteria. I could say, for what I can see in Georgia, for the results I can see in Georgia, that 80% could be healed. The patients we bring to Georgia are heavy patients who need a very customized service. It's Georgian patients, they come here, they are treated in a few days for a very recent infection. Western patients, if they come, this is because they have no other way, no other solution in their countries. So they're infected for years, decades, sometimes they've been operated sometimes 40 times and without any results. So they become very heavy patients. So for them, of course, they need much more customized services, much heavy services. So it can be more expensive for them than for Georgians for this reason. So anyway, it's much cheaper than antibiotics because these heavy patients have to take very heavy antibiotics for decades. That costs, I've got, for example, patients with cystic fibrosis, they take 2,000 euros antibiotics per month.
For a couple of years now, World Health Organization is constantly and strongly warning about antibiotic use and resistance, even going as far as to say that we are now reaching the end of an era. By 2050, according to the specialist, we could reach the same situation as the one in 19th century, where the slightest infection could be fatal. Phage therapy can therefore appear as the solution, and it's developed here in Georgia.